Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study, and we're going to continue where we left off yesterday morning. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we invite your presence as we open your word together. We know we live in a time of Earth's history. There's many things that are happening, many voices clamoring for our attention. But we just pray, Lord, that we can focus upon your voice speaking to us individually, as a group, as we study your word together. We ask for light for our feet, and that our characters can be reflecting that of Christ. Guide and direct in this study, correct anything that we need corrected, and direct us into the things that are the most needful. And we pray this and ask it in Jesus' name. Okay, so good morning again, everyone. Now, looking at this chapter 20, we started on it. So we have this situation that we were discussing regarding the start of the year. That is, the question is, can we demonstrate that this feast happens, that this new moon feast happens at the beginning of the year and not just some random month? So some of the evidences that we used had to do with the fact that the Jewish calendar has a fixed pattern of 30 and 29 days for the first 6 months of the year, so that once you have the beginning of the year, you don't need to look for the new moon every month. You already know what pattern there's going to be. That means that the Day of Atonement will always be on the 10th day of the 7th month. So the length of the 7th month isn't predetermined. That is, at the end of the 7th month, at the beginning of the 8th month, you would then, just observe the new moon. But since it's not part of their official religious calendar, the importance of knowing when the month isn't as great for the latter part of the year as it is for the beginning of the year. Does that make sense to people? Because, we have this really fixed sort of calendar. We know our calendar years in advance, millennium in advance. But with the Jews, the calendars they're not quite the same as how we look at calendars. So they have this religious calendar set up. And I've made the argument that that generally, how you determine what day of the month it is. Like in the past, it wasn't, they didn't have computers, they didn't have all this paperwork. People would just kind of by consensus agree what day of the month it was. I mean, even if you didn't personally witness the new moon, other people would have. And if you got, the wrong date, it wasn't such a big deal, right? But when Moses brings the Israelites out of Egypt, and now they are going to have this religious calendar being set up, then they need, at least in some way, a calendar that's partly predetermined, right? And that's going to be at the beginning of the year. So they wouldn't be doing this on the 2nd month or the 3rd month. And the thing is, there's 2 days or 3 days, like it's going to be the 3rd day. So there's going to be 2 days for this feast. And the idea is that, well, you don't know ahead of time when you're going to observe the new moon. You know that on the evening of the 29th, if you observe the new moon, the next day is the first day of the month, right? The first day of the month is going to start at evening. And if you don't see the new moon, well, then by default, you only have 30 days at the most in a month. So you just know the next day is going to be the 30th, and after that will be the first day of the month. So in this situation with this feast, these 2 days of this feast, this would indicate to me that this is the start of the year. And now there's, of course, a lot of prophetic significance in this. Right. So we know that the first day of the first month, the beginning of the year, the first time they have that occur, of course, is the year of the Exodus. So this month shall be the beginning of months, right? Is what God tells Moses. So the idea is, and when we deal with a month, the month is based on the moon, but the word for month is basically like a renewal, right? So when you're talking about the moon, like in the idea of the Hebrew idea of it, it's just a renewal. So you get a renewal when you see the new moon, and that word becomes the word for moon, right? So it's not like that in English. We just have this word moon, doesn't mean anything, right? We have the word month based on the moon, month, right? But for the Jews, that word for moon is the same word for the word renewal, right? So to talk about it as being a new moon or a month, right? Or those are really the same idea. So the idea of a new moon is really just the word month. Does that make sense to people? Is there any questions about any of that?
I have just a question concerning looking at the new moon after the seventh month. Cool. So they're following like a 29-30, 29-30. So
Yeah.
what would there be any, what would be the chances of there being after that seventh month, a 29, a 30, okay, another 30?
Well, okay. So because there is in my paper on dealing with the Molad interval, right? It addresses that, that most likely you're going to have in a year, you're going to have, well, you're going to have the odd time you're going to have 2 30-day months in a row, right? So it's not always going to be 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29. And commonly, you're going to end up with a 30-day month again, right? But sometimes you'll end up with 2 in a row. Now, of course, because you're going to run into the rainy season, you may end up with some, 3 or 4 30-day months in a row. And then you can't have then a 28-day month. So there are times you could go out to look and you would see the new moon, but you wouldn't start a month because it's not the 29th of the month, right? So because you've had some 30-day months in a row. But you can see that it wasn't that important, right? Like we think, well, it's really important you know which day of the month it is. What's important is the first day of the first month and all of those dates into the 7th month. After that, it's not particularly important, right? Like we have a hard time like recognizing that because of how we think of calendars. But for the average person, it's it's not that important back then, right? You just kind of know, like it's the middle of the month, it's near the end of the month. You see the moon and you see its renewal. There isn't some official importance in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th month, which day of the month it is. All right. Does that make sense to people? That it's, since it's not standardized, it in people's minds back then, it's not such a big issue.
Well, it would have been maybe an issue like for the likes of Zachariah if he's going to record this is the 24th day of the 11th month, or
well, later on. So later on, they're going to start, because you have the nations around them recording the months, right? So the Babylonians have a calendar, and so there starts to become, as time goes on, more standardized calendars. But I'm just saying, originally, because the calendar has changed over time. I mean, as far as I understand it, the original calendar, like in the time of Noah, would, because they were a bit more intelligent. I mean, they could probably just mentally calculate when the month is going to be, because they would understand the patterns better. You know, they didn't need computers. So, you know, in the time when Noah during the flood, I mean, he's probably not going to have the moon to see when the months are, but he's going to know when the months are because you know, he's going to understand like the moled interval or whatever. So, and they would probably use the full moon to determine the month rather than the new moon. That is, they would, you know, but there's a little bit of speculation on that. So we don't know. All we know is that there isn't a consistent calendar in the way that we understand it through all of biblical history. It's going to change on how they perceive the calendar, right? At the time of the Exodus, they now start counting the months. First time they number them, other than, you know, Noah numbers them in based on, well, this is the first month of his 600th year, or the second month of his 600th year, right? So you could number the months from anywhere. We sort of have calendars like that because you have like school calendars. There's sometimes business calendars. A business will start its business year like in July, you know, beginning of July, things like that. Some businesses have different times where they start their year. So and in ancient times they had different types of calendars. They had, you know, planting calendars, you know, for you know, things like that. You might have a calendar or a structure for like the courses of the priests. You know, in a sense, that's a type of calendar, some kind of pattern. So different kinds of calendars existed. But yeah, definitely it's going to start becoming more standardized, especially once the Jews are under the Babylonians. They're going to be using the Babylonian calendar, which is very similar to the biblical calendar. But, you know, I make an argument that Ezekiel is using the Babylonian calendar. He's in Babylon. And, you know, so he's not trying to calculate the calendar from Jerusalem. He's just using the calendar the way the Babylonians did it. And they're going to observe the new moon every month. The Babylonians are. They're not going to be doing 30/29 for the first 6 months of the year. And they don't number the months either. Like they're going to have, you know, the month in the spring is when they're going to count their kings from, but they're not going to ever call it the first month, right? So they never number them. You'll just never find a Babylonian numbering a month. It's always just a name. So they don't really have numbered months like the Jews do. And the Jews always number the first month as the month of Nisan or Aviv, even when they are counting a civil year from the fall. They never call the 7th month of the year the first month. They never call Tishri the first month, right? Because they always number the months from the spring. So these things confuse people. I've even seen chronologists who get confused by this and think that they're going to number the months in the fall. So yeah, when it comes to these later months, like if you got, you know, Ezekiel or Zechariah, you know, numbering the months, like, or not, but, you know, like they're going to number the months. Sometimes they name them. But when they're going to tell you which day of the month it is, I mean, there is a possibility that, you know, if we looked at it strictly based on our, you know, the ephemeris, right? You know, where we can look at the moon, you know, they might have got the wrong date, right? Because, or we got the wrong date, I guess, because maybe they didn't see the new moon that month. You understand what I'm saying? So you can't be 100% certain how somebody calculated which day of the month it was or observed which day of the month was, because it wouldn't really be a calculation, it'd be an observation. Does that kind of help a bit, Stephen? And everyone else?
Yeah, so even though Ezekiel is in Babylon, using the Babylonian calendar, he's still going to number the month according to Judea.
Yes. So he's going to use the biblical numbering, but yeah, he's going to be, and yeah, so he's going to use the biblical numbering, but he's going to use the numbering of that month, the day of the month, based upon the Babylonian calendar. That is, he's just calling it the first month. The Babylonians aren't going to call it the first month, but he's going to know it's the first month. So he's going to call it that instead of the Babylonian name. But for the date of the month, he would just be using the date that the Babylonians are. That makes sense. And he's going to use the month the way that the Babylonians are. So if they had, 29 days in their first month that year, well, so would Ezekiel, right? That's the conclusion I came to in analyzing Ezekiel's dates and how things are laid out. I can't prove it 100%, but it's also very logical that he's going to just use the numbering of the days that are around him, because it would be hard for him to know with certainty what happened in Jerusalem. And the other thing about my understanding of the biblical calendar, because you have a lot of people, Messianic people, who are going to observe feast days, and they're going to want to know what happened in Jerusalem to know when the month had started. Was there a new moon sighted in Jerusalem? Of course, they're going to do it every month as well, instead of having the 30/29 for the first 6 months. But I don't think that was God's intention. The idea of the calendar is that it's meant to be locally observed. Obviously, if you're in Jerusalem, and you're in Israel, you're going to use Jerusalem. But when you have the Jews dispersed throughout the world, back before we have computers and all this technology, people wouldn't be able to know when the new moon was in Jerusalem per se. So it's meant to be understood locally. And we do that with the Sabbath. Like, we don't follow the Sabbath in Jerusalem, right? I mean, we go locally based on observation. So there's a lot of, different views about that. But anyway, whether I'm right or wrong about some of these details, what we can say here in this story is that it's most likely that this is going to be the beginning of the year in the spring, that they're going to have this new moon day. Because if you're having this every month, it wouldn't be such a big deal, right? You understand what I'm saying? This seems to be an important celebration, the start of the year, right?
I think
What's that?
that there are people that do try to go by Jerusalem's sunset. I think if you're living north of the Arctic Circle or something, and the sun doesn't go down or the sun never rises, I think that's how they order their day.
Yeah,
The Sabbath.
Adventist.
Yeah, I think those in the far north.
Yeah, Adventists don't use Jerusalem.
Well, if you're living north of the Arctic Circle, how are you going to?
Oh, you just go the lowest point. When the sun's the lowest in the sky, then that's just the beginning.
Is that what they do?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So basically, it becomes kind of like around midnight. So, yeah, that's how they do it up in Baffin Island.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. There isn't many people who are above the Arctic Circle. Because I've been north of the Arctic Circle, but yeah, I don't know how many people live north of there. I know, like, Kik is north. Pangerton isn't. It's just south of the Arctic Circle. But I've never been to Kik, but I've been between Pang and Kik in Baffin Island. Okay. So they got this day that's going to be this new moon day. Now we asked the question is what is the significance of this as far as the symbols in relation to this movement? So we ask the question, we say, well, it's probably significant, makes sense that it's significant. But what would be the significance? Now, again, we have Saul representing the leadership of this movement. We have, and this is a persecution of July 18th. We have Jonathan, who represents the sort of the chronology that supports July 18th. Okay. And then we have this sort of a test being done, right? So Jonathan is going to be sitting down with Saul for this new moon feast, and David's going to be absent. And I have no idea really how we would look at this yet. I actually, haven't like come up with a solution to it, but hopefully we can. I focus more just looking at the symbols themselves, trying to discern what symbols are here. Okay, so in this, we got this word mist, right? Thou shalt be mist because thy seat will be mist, is what the translators say. And that's simply because, let me see, what do they see here? This is verse 18. So it's the same Hebrew word. That word for mist is 6485, pakad, which means to visit, by analogy, to oversee, muster, charge, care for, miss, deposit. So it's got like a wide variety of sort of meanings. Now it says, thou shalt be missed because thy seat will be missed. Doesn't really make much sense in English, right? And so the word missed, it's kind of hard to know. Yeah, Kelly put a comment there. Yeah, this is about the sun. Ellen White's writing in 1900. My sister, let not your faith fail. We are to stand fast by our colors, the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. All those who hold the beginning of their confidence firm unto the end will keep the seventh-day Sabbath, which comes to us marked by the sun. The fallacy of the day line is a trap of Satan's discourage, just Satan to discourage. So the idea of that has to do with what's happened. The day line is the line in, would affect people in that are east of New Zealand and Australia. The international date line is, I think, what she's referring to. Doesn't really address the people in the north.
Yeah, I'm looking for that.
Okay. Okay, so we got this, that his seat will be missed. So I'm trying to figure out what that, thou shalt be missed because thy seat will be missed. Now, so this word kind of means to pay attention to. So basically, it's not so much that thou will be missed, but your seat, it'll be noticed that you're not in your seat, I guess is the idea, because it's because this word, it means so many different things. To pay attention, to observe, to attend, to seek, to look about for, to seek in vain, need, miss, lack, to visit upon, to punish, to pass in review, to muster, to number, to appoint, to assign, to lay upon us a charge, a deposit, to be sought, be needed, be missed, be lacking, right? Yeah, there's just lots of meanings here. So I guess the idea is, it's sort of going to be numbered or noted. It's like you will be numbered, because your seat will be numbered. That would make kind of sense. You know, they'll pay attention to your seat because they're going to pay attention to your seat. Doesn't really make much sense. So it's kind of like you're attached to this seat. It's been appointed to you. There's a seat that's been appointed to you. And because of that, if you're not in that seat, then it will be noticed, right? That's the idea. So what could that possibly be representing? When would this be in our history that we would apply this story, right? That's the question. Now, in verse 19, right, it's going to say, and when thou hast stayed 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and shall remain by the stone Ezel or Ezel. Okay, so we got these 3 days here. So 3 days we know is the symbol. And we often put the 3 days dealing with these 3 dates, November 9th, July 18th, and December 25th, 2021. Now, is this something to do with these, like those 3 days? Is it something to do with the passing of time? So as we've looked at this, okay, Kelly put another one dealing with, yeah. So basically it says what I said. You can always see the sun. Yeah, these were objections that were brought up. Ellen White answers them. Okay, so we got these 3 days, and we, as we've moved through these studies, could this 3 days somehow relate to December 25th, 2021, as being the third day? That is, you understand what I'm asking? So we're going to have in this movement, we're going to have these dates past November 9th, July 18th, and David being July 18th, he's, as far as FFA is concerned, they're going to start this attack against July 18th. Now, so when we get to December 25th, 2021, obviously FFA is out of the way, but we still have this movement, sort of leadership of this movement with the Canadian and American groups, however we see that. And we're going to have, the American group, kick me out. And then the Canadian group do that on December 25th, 2021. They wouldn't say they did it, the Canadian group, but basically it's a de facto kicking out based on what happened. So would we attach the 3, because we've attached the 3 days before to that. Now, sometimes we attach the 3 days just to December 4th, 5th, and 6th in 2020. We've also done that, but we also connect it to these 3 primary dates in our 777 structure. Okay. Then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and shall remain by the stone Ezel. So this Ezel is 237 is the Hebrew number. So it's got the digits of 273. They're just in a different order. It's the stone of departure. So it's the final farewell between David and Jonathan. Right, the stone between Ramah and Nob. So David then, of course, is going to end up leaving. So he's got these arrows. And it doesn't tell us how many arrows he's going to shoot, but he's going to fire some arrows. And then, if the arrows are beyond thee, then that means for him not to. Right, in verse 22, go thy way, for the Lord has sent thee away. As touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of, behold, the Lord is between thee and me forever. So there ends up being this covenant made between David and Jonathan, right, as well, that's connected to this departure. So we have the king sat upon his seat, as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall, and Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. So we had some discussion, rather, about where did Jonathan sit. Abner's sat beside Saul. Was David's place meant to be like on the other side, or was Jonathan there? It doesn't really tell us where David's seat was or where Jonathan's seat was. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day. So the first day he's not going to say anything. And then we discussed, hath befallen him, he is not clean, surely he is not clean. So the idea is that if he had touched a dead animal's carcass, then he would be unclean until evening, right? So it came to pass in the morrow, which was the second day of the month. Now, again, second day of the month, that is the second day of the renewal of the moon. So whether this is actually the second day of the month or just the second day of the feast, depending on when the month actually began, we're not certain. But they knew ahead of time that there's 2 days for this feast. And David's place is, of course, going to be empty because he's waiting for Jonathan's message. Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meet, neither yesterday nor today? And Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. Right? And he said, let me go, I pray thee, for our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there. And now if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brother. Therefore he cometh not unto the king's table. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said unto him, thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said unto him, thou perverse rebel, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? For as long, so that's just the translators, so dealing with perverse rebellion, and thou perverse rebel. For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. So what Saul is telling Jonathan, if David's alive, you're never going to get your throne. You're never going to become king. Which of course Jonathan doesn't mind. Now, he shall surely die. He is the son of death, it says the translators. Yeah, so that is the son of death. That's literally what it says in the Hebrews. That's why they chose that. And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? And Saul cast the javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and did eat no meat the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had done him shame. It came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. Right? And he said unto his lad, run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And he said unto his lad, run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. That's just their translation. Pass over him instead of beyond him. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad and said, is not the arrow beyond thee? And Jonathan cried after the lad, make speed, haste, stay not. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the lad knew not anything. Only David and Jonathan knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad and said unto him, go carry them to the city. And as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of his place toward the south, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept one with another until David exceeded. Now, I'm not sure why they had to go through that pretense with the arrows if they're just going to talk to each other anyway. But this is what happened. So that's going to be the last time they see each other, right? So Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for as much as we have both sworn both of us in the name of the Lord. And that sworn is, we made a 7 times oath, right? Go in peace, for as much as we have both sworn of us in the name of the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Okay, so we have this covenant between Jonathan and David. This is the last time they see each other. It's going to be on this third day, right? So you got the day of the feast, the first day of the feast, the second day of the feast, and then this is the day following, right? Because it's going to be in the morning, right? The next morning. So that means they probably had these feasts in the evening, would make the most sense, right? In answer to a question that somebody had asked before. So you're going to have a feast technically at the evening of the 29th. Is that when we would have the first the first feast? And then the evening of the third, and then if you saw a new moon, is that how they would do it? So they're going to have 2 days. So the 29th and then it's going to be the first. It wouldn't be the 30th because if it's this actually the second day of the month, if that's how they're counting it. So the second day of the month in the morning, that's when David is going to leave. And we don't really know what year this is, right? Or do we? Stephen, can you answer that question? Do we know? We wouldn't know it specifically which year it is.
Probably just a ballpark figure.
Yeah. So we can't give it a date for this first day of the first month. So about when in Saul's reign is this? Like how many years is David going to be a fugitive?
Well, if David was born 10 years after Saul, and then Goliath, he's going to be about 15, so that's going to be 25 years. So probably if this is maybe a few years afterwards.
But do we have any indication how long he's a fugitive? Like,
well,
what's some years after?
Maybe about 13 years.
Well,
that he's a fugitive. Yep. Dwight?
Brother Stephen, I've got a question. You just said that David was born 10 years after Saul. Do you not mean that he was born 10 years after Ishbosheth?
Well, I mean, like 10 years after Saul's reign began.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
so
can agree with that.
Which was when Mephibosheth was born. Yeah, I suppose you could say that.
Well, I mean, it's just that David was not 10 years younger than Saul. He was 10 years younger than his son Ishbosheth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
I mean, when I'm looking at this, and as we've stated in the past, we do not have anything concrete to support this, but David would or could have been, let's say, somewhere in the area of 20 or 21, because at this point he would have been married to Michal. Now, giving that kind of a situation, then David likely would have been being hunted for about 9 years. But that's just a guess.
Yeah, before Saul dies. Yeah. I figure it's around 10 years or something that he's a fugitive. But, it's somewhere around there. But I wondered if anybody had like more specific information. So again, we have this pretense that's done with the arrows, and yet he's just going to talk to David anyway. So why does he do this? I mean, why doesn't he just meet with David, over by the rock and tell him personally? Because he's going to anyway. Any thoughts on that? And what would these arrows represent? Kelly says an all clear signal. But he could have just said, if I come out there, then it's all clear, right? So he's going to go through this whole act with the arrows.
Maybe like an excuse if someone said, "Where's Jonathan? Where is he?" He has someone with him who's going to collect his arrows to say, oh yeah, we just went out, we weren't doing anything, just, I don't know, just maybe back up an alibi if someone was going to ask questions.
Yeah, possibly. Now, what about symbolically? What's the significance of this? I mean, these events, they happen. We could say randomly, but they aren't random. We know that there's a purpose in them, in these stories.
Well, we've connected arrows to Islam.
Yeah, so we connected them to Islam. So would this have something to do with if the arrows are beyond him or have passed, as it says, passed over him? Would that indicate that the attack on Islam, on Nashville by Islam, didn't occur? Would that have something to do with that?
So the arrow is still future in a sense. It's beyond.
Yeah, maybe. Now we have for
Just
the word.
okay.
Yeah.
Just going back to verse 34, the second day of the month. So I think wasn't it in Samuel Snow's time? Wasn't it the second day was of the month was July 18? Because you have the 54th month.
Yeah, so it's going to be the second day of the fourth month. Yeah. Yeah, so you're attaching that to July 18th as a symbol.
Just a thought.
Yeah. Though it's going to be the next day, the next morning, right? It came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out in the field at the time appointed with David and the little lad. But so maybe it's just marking that this is passed over.
Well, we can mark then the disappointment on the 19th day.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's possible. Yeah, there's still.
Hi, Mr. Turner.
Hi.
Hi. Can I have a moment to speak?
Yeah.
You hear about Francis today?
Yeah. We talked.
Yeah, I wasn't really too big of a fan of him. I mean, he's a human. He had a breath of life just like anyone else, rest his soul. But I don't know. I wasn't too crazy about him. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of significance dealing with.
Did he pass away? Did he pass away?
Pope died. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't. Just trying to think about some of these numbers here. But so we got this arrow. Now the arrow is 2678. We know that the week of Christ is 2,570. So that's like 108 days longer. So this is like a period of 7 years, and on our calendar, 7 years and 121.25 days. I don't know if that means anything. I'm just looking at it as a span of time. I don't know where you could fit that into our lines. So he's going to shoot these arrows. But then you have this lad, who's going to be with him. He's going to run and find out now the arrows. That's what it says. Okay. Anything else about this story? He's going to give his artillery, it says to the lad. We've looked at that word before. It's just basically his stuff. Go carry them to the city. So he's going to tell him to carry this to the city. And again, so there's probably something to this story. I just don't know what it all would be. And then we have this covenant. So we have this covenant between David and Jonathan in this chapter. It's going to be the last time that Jonathan and David see each other. It's going to be at this stone of departure that they're going to shoot. He's going to go and shoot these arrows. Let this lad say that it's beyond thee, but he's still going to go and talk to David anyway. He's going to bow himself so that it says, David arose out of a place toward the south and fell on his face to the ground and bowed himself 3 times. Right? Now, this word 3 times is pa'am. We've run into this word before. It's got the digits of Capricar's constant. Capricar's constant 6174. This is 6471. We've been running into this one a few times in this story, in connection with this story. We're not sure specifically the significance of it. But we just know it's a symbol that we recognize. So there's lots in this story. Just kind of going back, like we just went through 42 verses the last few days. So all of this is about this initial jealousy of Saul and towards David, and how that unfolds until David ends up basically being a fugitive. And they're going to center it around this story is going to be centered around this new moon feast, connected, we believe, with the first day of the first month. So with the starting, so when it says the second day of the month, that's going to be the first month. We don't know the exact year, so we can't give an exact date for it, but that's what we have. Well, okay, what about this question? Like we're doing this study right now, and Zachary, mentioned that Pope Francis has died. Now he began his reign as Pope on the 13th of March in 2013. So it's
my birthday,
your birthday's
March 13th. Yeah, cool.
okay. Yeah, so that's when he became Pope. Now, let me think here. So I'm just putting some of these things in the calendar converter. So 3/13/13 is the date, March 13th, 2013. That ends up being, so to today, which is the day he died. So that's 4,422. Now, we've run into this number 4422 before, right? As a Hebrew number. Anybody remember what that was about? We had 4424 and 2244. So 4422 and 2244. So this was in connection with him escaping, right? Remember, that is slipping away when the javelin was thrown at him. Now, whether that has any connection with the number of days that Pope Francis has been Pope, I don't know. But that's going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 10. Because remember, we looked at these 2 times that the javelin was thrown at David. Now, with the 3rd time, it's going to be thrown at Jonathan. But Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin unto the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. That word escaped is the Hebrew number 4422. Yeah, 4424 was just me misspeaking. So I got 4422 and 2244. Yeah, so that's the Strong's number, 4422. Now, we also saw significance in the number 2244, which was an inversion of that. And that was in connection with, in 1 Samuel 19, verse 2, where it says, hide thyself. So the word hide thyself is the Hebrew number 2244. So it's just an inversion of 4422. So the one where he escapes is 4422. The one where he hides himself is 2244. So whether that was significant or not, I just took note of it. Okay, and just looking at other things in connection with this Pope. 4422.
And of course, using the rule of first mention, we would have Genesis 19:17 for 4422.
Okay. And what's that? So is there a significance of it?
Lot being told to escape Sodom.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's the first time it's mentioned. So when Lot escapes Sodom before its destruction. Okay. I know I'm doing lots of thinking here. It's not a very exciting video. Now you have, I'm just putting some other dates in here. Okay. I don't know. I mean, there's obviously things here that I just can't see them right now. Everything that. So what about this covenant? So let's just jump to that. So he makes this covenant. So which is to swear 7 times, right? So it's a 7 times covenant between Jonathan and David. Now, so it is. So what is this covenant? It's between him and them, between his seed, that is, David's seed, and Jonathan's seed forever, right? So how does this covenant work out? What does it mean? What is it that they're agreeing to? Is Jonathan just agreeing that he's going to let David be king, and David's not going to hurt Jonathan's children? Is that what is being agreed upon?
What if this is a covenant of mutual protection?
Okay, so that they're going to protect each other. Okay, well, how does that work out? Like, what's the practical nature of this covenant that they're making? In the story, does it come up? Is it relevant to anything that happens later?
Well, we know that the house of David protects the house of Jonathan.
Okay, so what stories do we have that show that, is what I'm asking.
Mephibosheth.
Okay, so
The issue, see, the issue here, as you ask, what do we have later that occurs that can be used to support this?
yeah,
Jonathan's son Mephibosheth was
that's
about
Jonathan's son, not. Oh, that's Jonathan's son Mephibosheth. Okay, so
Mark
how do
two.
you
There
how do you
are
spell that name? How do you spell that name?
just a moment. MEPH. Trying to get to this very quickly. As David seeks to do kindness to the house of Jonathan, so his son, okay, Mephibosheth, MEPHIBOSHETH. Now, here's the thing that we're going to be looking at in the near future. Jonathan had a son, Mephibosheth.
Okay,
Saul had a son by his concubine, Mephibosheth.
oh, so that's why I get confused.
Yes.
Okay,
Now, Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, is not put to death at the request of the Gibeonites because he is protected by David.
okay,
But-
and he's also lame. So you got Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame of his feet, named Mephibosheth.
That is correct.
Okay,
So Saul's grandson, Mephibosheth, was lame in his feet. Saul's son by his concubine is slain along with the sons of Merab that were raised by Michal.
okay. Yeah, so in 2 Samuel 19:24, Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. So that's a different Mephibosheth.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I always get names mixed up too. Because you also have Ithbosheth, which is another son of Saul, right?
Right. And I mean, that one is interesting too, because you've got one person with what could be 3 or 4 names, because Ishbosheth, or man of shame,
And
is
Ishbal.
is also noted as Eshbal, the man of Baal. But then you have Ishui, and depending on the spelling, you could have IHS or ISHUI or ISHVI.
Okay. So anyway, we can see that the idea of this covenant, what does it represent? Now, we understand that Jonathan represents the chronology connected with the stuff that I've uncovered, supporting July 18th. Now, David represents, of course, Christ, but in connection with July 18th as leadership of this movement, right? That's how we've understood it. That is, the leadership of this movement is Christ leading us, and he leads us through July 18th. Those that rejected July 18th reject Christ's leadership, right? That's the idea. So there's this covenant made between Jonathan and David. Exactly what that means, maybe it has something to do with protecting this part of the message. And if that's in connection with December 25th, 2021, then that covenant would have been made on 777 days after November 9th, 2019, when Stephen discovers that there's 777 years from 457 to 321, the year of the Sunday law, under Constantine, right? And that's discovered December 25th, 2021, and it becomes part of the light that comes on that date. So maybe it just represents, David being Christ, protecting the chronology, or the people connected with that. In some ways, preserving that in some way. I don't know. It's just maybe there's some other way to think of it.
Did those searches in the chat there that I posted help at all?
What's that?
The searches in the chat that I posted, do they help at all?
On the Hebrew numbers,
Etc.
like the Hebrew numbers 4422 and 2244 you're talking about?
Yeah.
Well, I looked at them, because I already have the Hebrew numbers.
I get
So
the
I think, so the one there where it talks about to reign or to rule, that doesn't.
Hold on. Let me finish.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
word can also mean to slip away or to escape, implying a departure or loss of
Yeah, I have trouble hearing you, Kelly. So I don't hear you clearly.
That's better. So the word can also mean to slip away or to escape, implying a departure or loss of control. That was 2244 or 4422, and then 2244. The act of hiding.
Yeah.
Or to conceal.
Yeah.
So the message of 187 was concealed at July 22nd,
July.
July 18. And what about the idea of David representing Christ, Jonathan? Who does he represent? And the covenant between Christ and his people, representing Jonathan and David, made a covenant.
Well, maybe on some other line, like a broader line, like if we zoomed out, right? I mean, that would be obviously that type of covenant. But here in this case, we're looking at this within the movement. So, so part of what we understood is that the 2520 was connected with December 6, 2020, because December 6 is 12 times 6 is, you got, well, not 12 times 6, but you got 2, 6, 12, 6. So that's like the 126 shekels, right? And then times 20, that gives you 2520. So there's something in connection with that, that this oath is the 7 times oath, to swear 7 times. So as far as in this movement, the way that I understand it is that there's a covenant that's made, right? And the 2520 curse, in a sense, comes upon FFA for rejecting it. But it's at the end of this 777 structure that we have this oath between Jonathan and David. If we're taking it, it's going to be like on the third day or whatever, however we want to look at it after the third day. I'm not sure how we would look at it, but it's connected with this structure. So what's being protected here then would be, must be specific to the chronology. If David is connecting the chronology, that's the way that I would look at it. But yeah, obviously anytime you see this covenant and you see David and you see Jonathan, it's going to be representative of a larger covenant. It's just that we've been applying these things to our movement. That's the only thing at this point. Okay, and then it's going to be between, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed. So forever. So this covenant that's made between David and Jonathan, we're going to see acted out with the protection of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth, he's going to be lame in his feet. So I'm not sure what that would refer to. So if you got like feet representing like the giving of the gospel, sometimes we look at feet representing that, the spreading of the gospel. Is that, I don't know what Mephibosheth would be. It's the son of Jonathan that's going to be protected, but he's lame in his feet. So that's going to be something we have to examine a bit more. I'm just trying to look at this. So that's going to be in 2 Samuel that we deal with all of this about Mephibosheth. The interesting thing about feet is it's the Hebrew number 7272. So it's a doubling number. It's also 72 plus 72 is 144. And then to be lame, he's maimed, right? Or smitten. That's Hebrew number 5223. Yeah. So I'm not sure what that would mean at this point. But we do have this. Okay, so one other thing, just going back to these arrows. So if I, let me see, so the arrows were 2671. But there was another number for arrows. It's 2671. Oh, they also have 2678. So an arrow, 2678 in 1 Samuel 20:37. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow, so that word arrow is 2678, which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out after the lad and said, is it not the arrow 2678 beyond thee? where when he talks about it in verse 36, and he said unto the lad, run, find out now where the arrows which I shoot, that's going to be 2671. Chetz, right? So it's just a chet, a he letter and a tzadi. Chetz. 2671, but the 2678 is chetzi, right? So again, they mean the same thing, but one has a yod at the end. So I'm not sure what the difference is between these, other than they're spelled different, but they appear to mean the same thing. And why they use two different words for arrows, I don't know. And they come from chatzatz, which means properly to chop or to pierce or to sever. So there's something that pierces. So they're a piercer. So that's something to think about as well. Yeah, so he's not skilled in the feet and not skilled in scripture knowledge. I don't know. So we're going to have to examine, this week we're going to have to spend a lot of time examining all of these symbols and trying to put them together into the story to figure out where they fit. But we have lots of symbols here. We can agree on that. So, any other thoughts? The only thing I can say is that if I take the number 2671 and 2678, pardon me, 2678, and I count from December 21st, 2012, that Mayan calendar date, it's going to bring me to April 21st, 2020. So that's 5 years ago. Now, the number of days from April 21st, 2020 to today, if we count both dates, is 1827 days. Right, so that's an inclusive count. Whether that's significant or not, I don't know. But, it is the day the Pope has died. Maybe there's some connection there. I don't know. Okay, any final thoughts? Okay, so think about these things and we'll come back to them tomorrow. Okay, let's pray. And dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've had this morning. We know, Lord, that we're just trying to hold these pieces in our mind to understand them. We just pray, Lord, for your continued help in understanding your word. And we know, Lord, that you are protecting us and caring for us. Even though we may be lame in the feet, we know, Lord, that you have a purpose for us. So we just ask, Lord, that you can watch over each person, your angels can protect them, and that you can continue to work in our lives to bring us closer to you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.